Hello and welcome to Get Ready News. My name is Dave Lindsted. This is my daughter Emma Lindsted. Mark is on special assignment in Thailand and Myanmar. I'll tell you what, this news cycle has been very interesting. I've never seen so many things that are changing and moving according to one event.
Yep, it's really crazy because I don't think I've ever really remembered an election or an event in my lifetime as much as I would remember this election and even a little bit the last election.
The last election, there was a lot of contention on who might have won and if cheating happened. And the thing that I find fascinating about this election was there was 10 to 15 million votes missing between this election and last election. And I even looked at a chart that showed 10 million votes, maybe even 15 million votes between the election before and last election.
Yep, I was looking at a chart and they were listing the votes and it's all like 65 million, 67 million, 63 million, 81 million,
Yep.
68 million.
So there's some bizarre things that happened in the last election, and I kind of think heroes, I would call him, like My Pillow guy. I can't think.
Mike Lindell.
Mike Lindell went out there and he was a warrior over the election from last time, and he pulled out so much information, so much stuff on the election. I think he was right, but we couldn't get anybody to listen or pay attention.
Yep, I think I also saw a comment that somebody made looking back at the last election, and while I think that, Donald Trump probably won the last election, and I definitely think it was cheated, I saw somebody make the comment, well, if he'd won last election, he wouldn't have had the House as Republican, he wouldn't have had the Senate as Republican, and the Supreme Court wouldn't have been Republican. But now he's got, all of it. He's got just about a full sweep. He can get what he wants to get done.
Yeah, and I also think that we also have to remember that just because he wants to get something done doesn't mean that it's going to happen. There are so many people we would call rhinos that are in the Republican Party that might cause a problem and slow things down. But I also think that there's a lot of this Esther thought in here, for such a time as this. God puts people in place. I even believe that God put Biden in place and put Kamala Harris in place, and it was all part of his plan. And I don't think we are doing anything on earth to affect God's plan.
Yeah, I think it's pretty funny that we find ourselves saying, oh, well, we did this, so we did this to God's plan, or, oh, God didn't do this because we did this. It's very conceited.
Yeah, and I believe that God wants us to vote, and I believe God wants us to participate and be a part of things, but we also have to remember that we're strangers in this land. This is not our home. We should be out passing the gospel to people more than we should be passing the talking points of a certain party or whatever to somebody else. But I want to read something real quick, and this is just a news app that I get, and it lists a bunch of titles, titles for articles. Now, if you haven't watched the program long, you will find out that just because you read the title of an article doesn't mean that's what the article's about. I don't know how many times I've read found missing link, and I go down and read the article, and there's nothing in it about that at all. It's like clickbait, right? So I'm going to read these headlines, and bear in mind, we're not going to delve into each one of these articles, but I want you to see what I'm talking about. Because of the election of Donald Trump and the prospect of him being in as president, I want you to see the impact this has made. Now, he's not even in office yet. He's just promised to be in office. Iran cancels plans to attack Israel after Trump victory. Crowds protest rising anti-Semitism in Amsterdam. Biden administration approves $680 million arm deal for Israel-Lebanon ceasefire agreement. U.S. House formally condemns anti-Semitism. U.S. House passes bipartisan bill to promote human rights in North Korea. Sanhedrin announces ruling all Jews worldwide must come home to Israel immediately. UN advisor fired over refusal to label Gaza war as genocide. There's all sorts of things that are happening in the world today, and we see just because Donald Trump was elected, the flow of everything has changed instantly.
Yep, it's like people are looking at him and they're saying, "Oh no, he's getting into office. We got to clean this up now." It's the same concept as when I was younger, and I still do it now. Is, "Oh no, Dad's coming home, and Mom and Dad are going to look at the kitchen and they're going to say, 'Those dishes weren't washed like we told you to wash them before we left.'" And so I get up, I'm hearing their car in the driveway, and I'm getting up now, and I'm already trying to wash them as quick as I can and pretend like I've been doing it.
It's amazing just the thought that Trump is going to be president changed everything. I mean, now we have Gaza that's wanting a ceasefire. Yeah, they always say that they did, but every time Israel would talk to them, they wouldn't accept the thought that Israel's going to come to it with this idea. Well, now all of a sudden they're doing that, and we see money starting to rebound. We see stocks starting to rebound. We see all sorts of things around the world that, in our eyes, look like good things that are happening.
Yep. And I think I've also seen a lot of the country was very separated before, but now everybody's saying, or except for the people who are very rooted in being a Democrat and very committed to it, they're saying, "Well, I voted for Trump because I think that that's going to bring about a golden age." And they're all saying, everybody's basically saying, "Well, I'm looking forward to this golden age." And they're all pretty okay with it, except for a few dissenters online,
I was talking to my sister and her husband yesterday, and they're Democrats, and we don't really have any issues with them. They're good people, just like every other person. They all want the best thing for everything. And we were talking about how RFK was going to be the health, and they said, "Oh, wow, we love RFK." And there's so many things that RFK has brought up that we're doing in America that is banned every place else. All these colors and these different additives that are being put in our food are banned in other countries. And so Trump is putting people into places that are bipartisan people, if you would.
Yep. I think that's something that's been coming out a lot recently is we're doing stuff that other countries don't allow. So I heard one guy, and of course I can't confirm this because I've never been to England, but he said that in England, some of the candy bars that are shipped over from the U.S. have a warning on the label saying this item includes this item, this item, this item, which are banned in Europe. And then there's also another guy that pulled out Fruit Loops from Canada and pulled out Fruit Loops from America. And he pulls them out of the bag, and one is this bright, vibrant, crazy colors, and the other is more natural-looking colors. And he's reading it, and we've got, like, red 40 and blue 36 and all of these, whereas the other one is dyed from the juices of fruits. And so he tastes them with a blindfold on, and he's thinking the American one's going to taste good because it's chemicals and everything made to taste good, but he still ended up preferring the Canadian one over it.
That's interesting. That would be an interesting video to watch. But I know that, I worked for a company who's based out of the UK, and they would come over here and try to get their fill of stuff that they can't have in the UK. It was just kind of funny to see that and to think that we are still using stuff that are outlawed in other countries. And, it's a relief to know that maybe RFK will get in there and change some of our health stuff. I've seen people that don't like him and say he's a quack, but I think he's better than the trans person that we had in there, and I don't know how that person could even be called healthy and how they could be a health advocate where RFK at least fits the bill and looks the part.
Well, I think it's a difference in what the goal was. So Trump, I feel, is looking towards the vast majority of Americans and looking towards fixing the health of America itself for everybody, whereas Joe Biden and Kamala were more looking towards fixing minorities and helping
Yep.
minorities. And so they were looking more towards trans people and people that are queer and providing them health care. So they appointed somebody who was going to focus on that instead of overall health for America.
But you know what's interesting is that Trump has appointed 2 homosexuals to his cabinet positions and to positions like that. And that's something that Mark and I have been talking about recently is regardless of what you think with Trump, there's a lot of people that believe that he's the savior of the United States. And I really have an issue with that. I think that he ran on policies that I liked and I supported. But on the other hand, I don't support and I don't like some of the appointments he has put into place. And regardless of what you think, Trump is not anti-abortion, and he is not anti-LGBTQIA plus. I don't know what all the symbols are, but he's not against that. And it's always shocked me that community of people haven't supported Trump. They actually think he's out to get them when he's probably their biggest supporter.
Yep. And I think it really surprised me when I was scrolling through Facebook the other day, and I think you were in the room with me, and I saw Ivanka Trump, and she had a whole video about why she supports abortion and why she thinks it's necessary. And I was like, I turned to you and I said, I didn't know that Trump and his wife were for abortion. And you go, well, yeah, they just want it restricted, which I think is what a lot of, as much as we don't want abortion, like period, no abortion, I feel like a lot of Christians and Republicans and conservatives would say at least restrict it. And it's the same with the trans movement. At least he's trying to restrict it to not be for children, to be just for adults. And I remember watching another video of a woman that was coming out and she said, all these women are crying about not being able to kill a baby. But I'm crying because now I'm allowed to have a baby, because some of the methods to be able to have children are being placed as medical care that insurance has to cover because he's going into office, which I thought was a cool contrast.
Yeah, and of course they try to smear it and say that he was completely against a lot of this stuff, that he's actually for. The other things I look at is I find fascinating was The View, and some of these other shows were calling him Hitler, was saying if he gets put into office, the world is over. The United States is over. Women aren't going to have any rights anymore. And I'm thinking to myself, well, women have all the rights I have today. I can't think of a right that a woman doesn't have that I have. She can do anything she wants to do. She can do whatever. It doesn't mean she can physically do it. And that's a topic for another day. But it was such a world ender, and I think that's why we saw these people try to assassinate Trump. But all of a sudden, the next morning, The View comes on and says, oh, we need to have a peaceful transition. And they've been called out, and some other places have too, and they said, if he is such a diabolical, evil nemesis, and you believe that the world is over because he was elected, why are you all of a sudden okay with that?
Wasn't that something that Kamala was saying? It's for the debate. It's fuel for the debate to be able to call him whatever she wants.
Yep.
But that doesn't necessarily mean that she thinks that about him.
Right. And they're telling me that they can, I'm looking at the Muslim playbook here. The Muslim playbook is I can lie and tell you anything I want to get the upper hand. And I feel like that's what's happened here. All these things have been said about him. Now, you bring up Kamala, and that reminds me of the first time that she was in a debate with somebody named Joe Biden. And Joe Biden, of course, and her were running for president, and she attacked him and told him he was racist and that she didn't like him, she didn't like what he supported or anything, and that he was a racist person. Well, she ended up dropping out because nobody voted for her at all. And then Joe calls her and picks her to be the VP, and what does she do?
And she immediately says yes, and she's the first black lady to be our vice president. She's the first woman vice president. She's all of this stuff that she would have told you that Joe Biden was against having.
Exactly. And it's funny because they interviewed her and they said, well, I'm surprised that you said yes to Joe because you called him a racist. And she says, oh, that's just debate stuff. So the things that they argue, I don't care what side you're on. Those things that are argued in front of us to make us make a choice regardless if they're true or not true.
Yeah, I find it interesting that most presidential elections feel like they come down to a character.
Yeah.
Instead of arguing what their policies are or what they're going to put into place, it's character smears and talking about how good your own character is. And I think that that's what a lot of people in America look at when they're voting too. And that just baffles me.
And I think that's true, except for this one seems to be different. And the difference is that I watched a lot of videos of people going out on the street and chit-chatting with both Biden and Trump voters, or probable, or last time were, or whatever you want to call it. And most of the ones in Biden said, well, we like Trump's policies. And they're tired of living in this huge inflationary world that we live in. And of course, keep in mind that it's just not the Democrats that are responsible for this. It was the pandemic. It was things that even Trump did that caused our inflation to go up. But you know, people are starting to see it matters who you vote for, and you get what you vote for. And so this time I think people said, hey, we're changing and we're going over to this other guy. And I see a lot of blues becoming reds. And I don't know if permanently reds, but at least for this one election.
And I think that was also something I noticed. Some of the people that were still being interviewed and still voting for Kamala, some of them could give the policies that they liked or a reason, but most of them said, well, I'm a woman.
Yeah.
Or, well, I'm gay.
Right.
So, of course, I'm going to vote for her because I have solidarity, right?
Right. Just principle of it. Now, something I find fascinating, and I like to bring this up, and I find it kind of edgy, if that's the right word for it. And it just really gets me all the support and everything that's happened around the world because of Trump being elected. One of the things that we've always talked about over here at Get Ready News is how influential the Antichrist would be. Now, I'm not calling Trump the Antichrist. You can mark that out. I don't think he's the Antichrist, but on the other hand, I don't know that maybe he's paving the way for the Antichrist. You look at the response of people. People overwhelmingly are liking him. They're finding his policies. People are, from other countries are excited that he's coming on. We had I believe he talked with the president of Mexico, and he was trying to he told him he was going to put a 25% tariff on their stuff coming over. And I'm all for tariffs, and that's something we can discuss some other time, but we got other things to talk about today. But he wants to leverage tariffs against immigration, and he wants her to stop the immigration from coming in through our southern border. I think the last president he worked with, he said, well, I'm going to withhold money if you don't do this. And of course, they did it, and they slowed down. We had a very low amount of immigrants coming over illegally when Trump was in office.
Yeah, and it's funny because what's the biggest complaint, or second biggest complaint with Biden-Harris is the level of immigrants coming in. And it feels like every other day there's a news flash or something about immigrant harms a woman, immigrant harms a family, immigrant steals so much money. And it's not necessarily people that have come over here looking for a new life. It's people who have come over here to bring their crime here. Because that's what a lot of people do, is they flee from the sentences in other countries here. Yep. Well, if we're not checking them, how do we know?
And I think that's what most people in the country want. We don't have a problem with immigrants coming in, but we want to make sure we're not getting the gangbanger, and we want to get the people in that want to be productive and that want to contribute to society and become American. And I think that's that's a big difference. In fact, I have several friends that are from Mexico. One of them that's got his citizenship in America now, and he is anti-illegal immigration, and he voted for Trump. So I see that everybody sees that. But what really strikes me is Trump commends this power. He has this this way of working with the world and making people do what he wants them to do. And my dad said the other day, just out of jest, well, he did get shot in the head. But I don't think that he's the Antichrist. But I think I can see how the Antichrist could come into a situation to where it looks like it's broken to pieces and it's unredeemable. And this person could come in and take charge and rally everybody behind them.
Yep. And I think we see that a lot happening in history, just in
Yes.
general. Obviously, the first one that comes to mind is Hitler, because Germany was being punished for the First War, and they were all down in the dumps. They were like, "This is horrible. You've ruined our economy. We can't survive."
Yep.
And so he used that to step up, and he goes, "Well, look at this. I'll fix this and this and this." And people liked him at first.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until he really got going and he really got that power that he kind of started to go a bit stir crazy and start enacting all of this other stuff. But people were so excited for a change and so eager to see this being fixed that they were willing to go along with this plan to murder people.
Yeah, and I don't know that they really wanted to believe it. And one of the things that Trump said back in 2015 was, I could walk out in the street here and shoot somebody and still be elected president. That's how much people loved him. And I can see that. And that's kind of the same thing with Hitler. People were excited to see what he was doing with the nation. It looked like things were bouncing back. And here they are starting to be prosperous again. And one of the things that my dad and I were talking about is, the Antichrist isn't going to come in with a bunch of bad stuff. He's going to come in and promise you everything that you ever wanted.
Yeah.
And so I'm not saying Trump's the Antichrist. I don't want everybody to give me bad emails and stuff, but it's very interesting that we can see how the Antichrist could come in and take over.
Yep. And I'd not to liken Joseph to the Antichrist, but I also look at the story of Joseph, where he came in and the king was like, "Oh, I'm having these dreams. This is all happening." And he comes in and he's like, "I can fix that problem. I know what your dream is." He tells the king the problem, what the dream means. And the king goes, "Oh, so you have an idea of how to fix it?" And he goes, "Yeah, I can fix it." And so the king puts him second in charge.
Yep.
And he becomes this huge influential figure. And he shapes the way that Egypt looks for a long time too.
Absolutely.
And I think it's a very obvious reoccurring pattern. And so we're seeing exactly in our lifetime, we're seeing exactly how that can happen. And I think that we're going to put the Antichrist up like what we would have put Joseph as, because we're going to look at him and we're going to say, we're going to have peace. We're going to have prosperity. We're going to be unified, which is something that a lot of people are pushing for, is unity. Oh, why don't we just hold hands and be happy and stop with wars and everything? And I think that he's going to come in and he's going to look so appealing and so appetizing to everybody that we're going to say, okay, sure, well.
Yeah, and I think that the goal has always been to have a one world government. And we were kind of talking about that earlier, and Revelation 13:1 kind of describes that government. It talks about the beast that comes out of the sea, and it's got 7 heads with 10 horns. And if you look at the horns in Revelation 17 and the horns back in Daniel, I think those are the same horns, the kings of these different areas. It was kind of neat. Our uncle, Dr. Lindsted, has written up a thing and shown the UN has divided the world to 2 different regions. And so, we kind of joke about, well, maybe these are the 10 crowns, maybe there's a king over each one of these regions. But something's going to happen. It's going to say that there's going to have a wounded head. Well, I think that wounded head is to the political government. Daniel says that out of those 10 horns, 3 are going to be uprooted.
Yeah.
And then the little horn is going to come up out of that. So I wonder if out of those 10 horns, 3 come out, and we're like, oh my goodness, how's this going to work? These 3 kings are gone. This is falling apart, and I think the Antichrist is going to swoop in and save the day, and he's going to say, hey, I can fix everything. And everybody's going to hand him all the keys to the city, all the treasury to the city, everything to him, and let him control everything.
Yeah. And you made the joke about Trump having like his head injured, but we were talking and we were like, it's not necessarily going to be a person. It feels
Right.
like it will be that country.
Yeah.
And that would be the reviving.
Yes.
And it wouldn't be the same nature as a person getting hurt and then being like remade AI or anything like that. We're going to see something that's so politically moving that
Yes.
people are involved in this politics.
Yeah, and I think eventually the face of the beast, which is the one world government, becomes the Antichrist, and the Antichrist becomes the one world government. I think he becomes that, and then of course he wants to become the one world church too, so he kills the false prophet and assumes that also.
Yeah. So I think I can definitely see how we could get there, because I also think that I don't know that Trump is really pushing for it, but he's become like a figurehead for religion too.
Oh, absolutely, and I find that interesting that you say that. There's been many groups that have prayed over him and with him, and some groups are not, in my opinion, not that good of a group to be doing that. But on the other hand, I see a lot of reputable people, and I don't have a problem praying for him and praying over him, and I'm fine with that. But you have to be careful how you present yourself around that situation.
Yep. And then I think back to the controversy where Kamala said that you're at the wrong rally because somebody said something about God, but then J.D. Vance, not long after, agreed.
Yeah.
And I don't know if he believes that or not, but either way, he still played the people towards him by agreeing after she disagreed.
Yeah, and I think that's what it's all about. I think the Trump and Vance are legitimate people that want to do things, but on the other hand, this is what I see: the Antichrist and his people come in and pull everybody to their side. Thank you so much for being here today at Get Ready News, and we look forward to seeing you again.